with another panel. This time it's going to be moderated by OFIR BRILL, who is head of the TLV office at Tune. And the panel is going to be about how fraud is changing the AdTech ecosystem. So, panel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gabay. Take your head of the phone. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to here. Welcome to Tel Aviv. We are going to talk today about probably one of the hottest topics in the industry, which is fraud. And I will let you just introduce yourself without further ado, and then we'll discuss.
Hi, I'm Madi, Chief Revenue Officer for SelectMedia.
AMNON, it's great to be here, I think for the third time in this panel. I'm the CEO of GeoEdge. We are doing ad protection.
Hi, I'm Daniel LEVIT. I'm representing the Google Cloud.
Hi, I'm Julia Smith. I'm an independent consultant, but I'm also Director of Communications for Forensiq, which is an impact radius company and the leading fraud prevention tool. And delighted to be here now. It's sunny, because 2 weeks ago I came and it rained, and I thought it always rained in Tel Aviv. But I've discovered it doesn't, which is pleasant.
So thank you and welcome, everyone. I'll start with a more like open question. Let's look at the last 2 years in the video ecosystem, in the video industry. How do you see the progress in the last 2 years from your point of view, from your company, from your role as a general observation?
Shall I start? So I think this huge change has been, there was 2 years ago, the supply and demand was incredibly unbalanced. There was very little supply and huge amounts of demand. And I think programmatic has increased, has rebalanced that, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, it's had an impact potentially on CPMs, and it's almost opened the door for fraudulent impressions being allowed to come in. When you look at an industry or a sector that's incredibly valuable, fraudsters automatically go after it. We saw it happen with mobile first. Unfortunately, video has followed suit. So as somebody, obviously, we work as Forensiq in preventing fraud, and we work with all the top companies and a lot of the companies here in Israel. But it's sad to see, unfortunately, that in the last years, the rise has been quite steady. In fact, more than steady, dramatic in fraud in video.
No comment.
Yeah, so today we see, I think, video become mainstream. There is much more inventory. You know, back in the days, it was mainly pre-roll. Today we have outstream. We also have some kind of consolidation between native and video. Rich media, back in the days, it was only display. Today, rich media can also contain video as well as display, so there's much more inventory. And accordingly, the supply and demand the ecosystem became much more robust. There are much more players, and as Julia mentioned, now there is, because there is much more long tail and many more players, there is more room for the bad guys, you know, to do fraud on one hand, and from our perspective, to introduce quality issue into the video ecosystem. Today, we can see much more issues such as malware and auto-redirect that were traditionally only on display, and we are starting to see the signs that are slightly penetrating into the video space as well.
Well, my take on the last 2 years, it was a gold rush in video. I think a lot of companies made a strategic shift to turn into video. There was a lot of problems in the ecosystem, and like every ecosystem, where there's a lot of money, fraudsters will try to eat up some of those budgets. But I think today, the advertisers are evolving, but also fraudsters are evolving. And the fraud can take now many faces into the ecosystem, and it's, I think, becoming more and more of a challenge really to identify what type of inventory is really fraud and what kind of fraud they are doing inside that ecosystem.
So let's try to look from an advertiser point of view about what's going on inside the AdTech ecosystem and how they see it. Okay, so I'm going to jump a little bit further, but there is a case which is happening now, which is the Procter & Gamble case that affected a lot of partners in the ecosystem. And just to spice up the discussion, I want to bring like real-life examples of what's going on the advertiser side, on the brand side, how they see it, and what's their take on it. So I think Procter & Gamble case is something which will bring it to light. So Julia.
So Mark Pritchard was, it was incredible what he said, disappointing for the industry, but the fact that he said digital advertising is murky at best and fraudulent at worst. Though that really highlighted and resonated with a lot of marketers, and we have seen an increased amount of concern from marketers. There was a recent report saying 41% of marketers are now concerned about the lack of transparency. That's a figure we need to turn around next year. I think the headlines have been all for the wrong reasons this year. But the good news is, now it's right at the advertiser's door, the fact is it has to come from the money down. And the pressure from advertisers needs to say, I only want to trade with agencies that have processes and tools in place. The agencies then say, I only want to work with DSPs that are actually able to clean up the channels and the pipes before they even go onto the exchange, et cetera, down the line. So if it can come from the money down, I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. I did want to cite another thing. One of the largest agency holding companies has raised a concern with us, which is about guaranteed viewability, and some publishers are doing forced viewability with video ads, so you're unable to scroll past it. It forces you back up again. Just as a warning, the advertisers and the agencies are onto this. So please don't let this be yet another headline that now video is going to be put right to the top with us doing forced gap viewability. So that would be another area. But it's good to see pressure comes from the ads down. Let's see us clean up our act.
Madi, do you have anything else to add about this, or to say about different other cases that happened and how it affected in terms of budgets and stuff?
First of all, regarding the Procter & Gamble case, I see it a bit hypocritical or something like that, that brands are coming and saying stuff like that. There's one thing that, that agencies, and working a lot with agencies, that you see that is going on with the brands and the agencies. In every order that they want to buy, budget is always a KPI. And whenever you want to push the budgets down, you're going to get fraud into the system. That's a fact. When you try to buy inventory that you know is expensive and you try to buy it for cheap, you're probably going to get fraud inventory. At least part of it is going to be fraud. And as long as the agencies and the advertisers are going to try to push the budget down, you know, when you look at our industry and you look at the TV industry, TV is inflation. There's an inflation of, I think, 13% every year in budgets. Budgets are always going up. In our industry, every year, budgets are going down. Advertisers want more KPIs. They want viewability. They want completion rate. They want a lot of KPIs to be answered, but they want to pay less. So if you want more and you want to pay less, I think it comes in every vertical and in every industry, not only in ours, you're going to get fraud inventory.
One of the problems we're up against is that the best performing impressions are those that are fraudulent. The best performing clicks are those that are fraudulent. So we've had a little bit of a problem this year, is that once channels have been cleaned up, the advertisers are going, shit, this doesn't work as well as we thought. And that's something we've got to re-educate, saying, look at the attribution, look at the conversion, look at the end result, the actual consumer you're targeting. I actually was with an agency once, and they said, well, we don't mind about that. It was a really great performing campaign. And I said, not a single human being saw your ad. No, but it doesn't matter. The client's rebooked with us. But no one saw it. And still, we went round in circles, and they just didn't care. Now, I don't think that's the case anymore because they can't afford to be. But it's just a point to raise, I think.
Yeah, we are focusing on the Procter & Gamble, but I want to say that this is only the tip of the iceberg, because at the end of the day, the big advertisers, the big brands, they're looking for trust, they're looking for transparency. And since we cannot provide them this kind of trust in the ecosystem, we see other signs that they are looking, to spend their dollars in other places. So PMP, I mean, what is the motivation behind private marketplace? These are a group of companies that say, okay, we know each other and we want to conduct business with each other without the risk that, that the bad guy will steal our money. Also, many people in the industry keep complaining that the money goes to Google and go to Facebook. But Google and Facebook, I know that they have, all the data, but one of the things that they also provide to brands, they provide transparency and provide trust. When we work with publishers, sometimes they tell us, we don't want to work with any other exchanges or SSPs. We only want to work with Google because we know that the ads that they will bring to our website don't have malware. So they are willing to make more money as long as they have trust and as long as they have, high quality demand.
Okay, so
to add a little bit, that the fact that currently the infrastructure is much faster and the catch of machine learning and artificial intelligence is so high, so it allows now the companies that are aware of it to develop ways to provide, in the end of the day, a more quality product to their customers. Therefore, today people have the tools that are capable in the short time that they have to provide it. So it's only a question of who's going to win the race.
Can you give like an example?
Well, Google itself uses a lot of our, we publish TensorFlow, we're using a lot of our products to make sure that within our content, whether it's YouTube or other stuff, that we do not, that we're much more aware of the content, therefore we're much better at matchmaking rather than, promoting things which the customer in the end of the day is not willing to. Therefore, and our technology and our infrastructure, which we also provide to our customers, allows to do it much faster. Therefore, you do not have to compromise today.
So talking about Google, and we can't go out of here without mentioning ads.text, of course, and its effect on the industry. We talked about how the advertisers see it. Now going from ads.text to how that affects the industry, and from there to all the tools that we have in the industry now, the fraud tool, to create some kind of language that will allow transparency to the advertisers to see through and to have more trust in the industry. So starting from Madi, I guess, ads.text, how it's disaffecting, and the fraud tools.
Well, I can say ads.text is an interesting initiative. It's going to clean up well, it's going to clean up one type of fraud in the industry. And that's the mediators fraud, or that's the guys who are trying to undermask domains and try to do stuff like that. Again, if a publisher or if publishers they want to buy or they are active in fraud users, ads.text is not going to solve that problem. That's still going to be a problem in the industry. But it's an interesting initiative. I think it's version 1 of ads.text. Because currently, it's a very big headache for publishers to implement it. Not the implementation itself, but the management of the ads.text. You need to put in the partners. If you put it wrong, then it doesn't work correctly. One of the things that people need to understand, especially in the AdTech, is that publishers are not in the AdTech business. Publishers are in the content business. If you talk directly to publishers, you'll see that 90% of them don't really understand what you're talking to them about. They don't really understand AdTech. They don't understand technology. They understand their vertical, their niche. They understand producing content. And for them, AdTech is gibberish. So for them to implement an ads.text file, for probably everybody here sitting in this room, it's fairly easy, and you see it's not a big problem to do it. For a publisher, it's a big headache. Now, if you start asking to make changes in the ads.text, it's become a bigger headache, and some of the publishers are really asking themselves, why do I need this? And lastly, you kind of give out all your secret sauce. So if you have any good advertisers that are working with you now, everybody can see it. And you're kind of exposing all of your demand sources, or wherever you are getting your demand, it's all exposed to everybody, which is a challenge for publishers themselves. I still see it as a good thing at the end of the day, because it kind of at least opens a path where we'll have more direct and clean inventory in the ecosystem. But we're still a long way of having a good solution there.
Yeah, so I think it's an incredibly powerful aspect to it. I mean, ads.text does mean authorized digital seller, and that's really all you're really showing is who am I trading with and being able to declare it. There is instances in which publishers like to do a third-party audience extension, and you want to actually fulfill an insertion order by that aspect, and suddenly you're going to have to be more transparent. But again, that's probably where we see the highest instances of fraud, so I welcome it. I do think, obviously, you still have to battle, you still have to use technology in order to battle technology. So you're talking about URL masking. Unfortunately, you still need tools like Forensiq that does true URL in order to combat that, because we do see it in instances, it still gets through. But anything that actually improves trading and shows transparency is welcome from, I think, all partners. And one thing I would say, it does need to get critical mass uptake, and it hasn't got there yet.
AMNON?
Yeah, just to add one small point about ads.text. So ads.text solve a very specific problem in fraud. Okay, it's domain spoofing, and I think it's a very good mechanism, and I think this is the right direction. But I mean, I can give you another example. It doesn't specify which kind of the kind of inventory that the publisher actually offer. So in the AdTech, you don't know if the publisher have video or have display. So problems such as in-banner video that we see more and more can still happen. Okay, so someone can buy inventory. You know, he thinks that he's buying a video, but eventually.
So how do you see it from GeoEdge point of view? All this and generally in fraud, because you come from the publisher side more.
Yeah, so we are working with publisher, and we have basically two goals. One is to help them to maintain high user experience. Okay, user experience is a big word, but if we mention, for example, in-banner video, if they have a page that already have some kind of a video content, and now they have a display banner, they don't want another video banner in that page. So this is about the user experience, right? If there will be two videos playing simultaneously, that might be a bad user experience. But it also connects to monetization, because when you actually go and monitor what happened in video and how different players actually auction on the inventory, if there are too many players, you start to see issues such as latency. You start to see issues that some of the demand partners don't have an empty media file, so they miss opportunity to do monetization on impression. So we help in the publisher basically to bridge both of these problems.
Okay, so two questions in one. How do you see the cat and mouse game ends eventually between the fraudsters and the advertisers and the AdTech? And do you think there will be a standard? Because, like, you know, Google AdTech is obviously a standard by size, but do you think there will be like a standard of fraud tools, fraud prevention tools for mobile? For video. Yeah.
So I'll answer this. So I think the cat and mouse aspect, and worryingly, there's a Query Click has just done a survey or report that shows it could be nearer to £20 billion in fraud, which is, I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. So my question is often, are we losing the battle with this cat and mouse game? They seem to be 2 steps ahead. I would say that being somebody who's representing the fraud prevention tools, we're absolutely catching them up in so many aspects. And the point is, they only make money when money flows through to their sites. So you cut them off at source, you're eradicating those. Yes, it then takes some time to come back with something in a different area, and we're almost thinking ahead. So this is why we're ahead of we've looked into the sports bot. Meth bots was something that we're able to tackle, and we're tackling things quicker, which is a positive step. As far as
I want to emphasize, how do you keep track? What's like, this is an interesting question. What's the trends that you see? Where is it evolving to? How do you keep track with all the...
So this is down, I think, well, obviously with everything, we look at algorithms, we look at anomalies, we're using incredible technology and data scientists to enable us to come up with those answers. This is high-end technology that's battling these quite very, very clever fraudsters. So we're obviously not going to give away my secrets as to how we do it, but certainly what we're doing is powerful across mobile and video. I mean, the big threats next year are going to be install farms, mobile install farms, which doesn't affect video, but is going to affect mobile. Yeah. So we're already looking ahead of that.
Affecting already, not will affect.
Then what was your second question? The second part.
Will we have a standard? Like we have like 4 or 5 major tools today. We will have a standard in the industry.
We're all under pressure to go through accreditation process. Forensiq is doing MRC accreditation and the GeoEdge accreditation, and I think these are absolute musts. I think next year, my prediction for the end of the year is everybody will need to show accreditation either from the buy and sell side, as well as those who are providing the tools. There has to be standardization. Obviously, we're up against our competitors, but we work with companies like Group M who test us every 2 months against our competitors, and we continually catch more fraud. The minute we don't, we'll get swapped out for one of the others. So in a way, the agencies, and I'd recommend for you guys, you test, you show, you create the standards. And when there's inconsistencies, you ask why, and you ask them to show the data reason. And that's where Forensiq comes in. We show exactly why we said it to be fraudulent and why it is.
Daniel, what do you think is the biggest threat for user experience in video today?
Repeat, sorry?
The biggest threat to the user experience in video today that you see in Google in general?
Well, like I said, I'm from the cloud division, but I think, again, when there is money involved, there is fraud. There is always be new ways of fraud and new approaches to it. I think that really companies like Forensiq and GeoEdge, the fact that they're using the latest technologies and the fact that they have big data tools that allow them to do it much faster today really helps them catch the bad guys much sooner.
Okay. Amnon, back to the cat and mouse question. Do you have anything to add?
I mean, I'm not sure about the cat and mouse. I mean, we don't have a world peace yet, so I think it's more or less the same question. I think there will always, if there is money, there will always be bad guy that will try, to get some of it. Perhaps, just to give you some example about what we are seeing. So one of the latest attacks that we've identified is cyber mining. So today what you see that there is ads that is being rendered on the user and everything looks okay, but behind the scene there is a piece of code that tries to mine bitcoins on the user browser. So just a great example of how the threats evolve and and how there are more and more issues that will always can risk and jeopardize the user experience.
Madi, anything to add, and then moving to cryptocurrency and blockchain.
I agree here with Amnon. Cat and mouse is going to keep going on as it has been. Fraud is not going to stop. I don't think companies like Forensiq want fraud to stop, then they would go out of business one day. But it is going to continue. It's probably going to get more difficult and it's going to be more challenging, but there are always people who will fight fraud and I think, one of the main things about fraud is that we need technology to solve it, but you cannot only rely on technology. You need to use your common sense and really to look at stuff. And even if a tool tells you this is fraud, and the publisher, and you use your common sense, then you can really check it, and vice versa. And if it isn't fraud, and it doesn't, and there are hackers today who are working on, combating companies like Forensiq to sell fraud as clean inventory. If it looks too good to be true, then it's probably fraud. If the inventory is answering all your KPIs, then it's probably fraud. Because at the end of the day, there is no one person that wants to see ads. Nobody wants to see ads. Everybody wants to get to the content. That's every user. When you go home,
start focusing on making more innovative and innovative video content, which I think is happening.
It's happening, but it's very expensive. And it's very small. We are always laughing in the U.S. There is only one time a year when people want to watch ads, and that's the football in the football match, the Super Bowl match. That's the only one time people want to see ads. But in the rest of the day, when you go home and you turn into YouTube or into any other video channel, you just want that skip button to pop up where you can skip it and move on. So we always need to take that in mind. So inventory that looks too good, it's probably fraud as well. So I'm always saying, fraud will be here. We'll need technology to solve it, but people start to use their common sense also into really looking at the inventory and seeing what is good to buy and what is not good.
One quick question for blockchain. Do you see, for Julia, do you see programmatic affecting on fraud positive or negative? And also, do you see video moving more towards performance in terms of understanding user, like tracking user activity post-video?
So as far as, at the minute, programmatic, so far to date, programmatic has had a negative effect. I think we're turning the corner, because it has to turn the corner, and I believe next year we'll see a much more positive, and the headlines will be about the positive effects of programmatic. There's no doubt from a trading perspective, it's opened huge doors. But the fact is we see ourselves, my one bit of advice is just don't trade in the open auction. It's murky, it's polluted, and you just need to take this. You don't necessarily need to. Trade with premium publishers within programmatic, create deal IDs, do PMPs, know who you're trading with. But I would advise that the open auction is a very murky pool still, and we're doing our best to clean it up. And those platforms such as AppNexus has cleaned up hugely from their exchange, which helps all these factors. But it is murky in there. But I think overall programmatic, of course, has an amazing effect. We have responded by obviously measuring everything in pre-bid, so when you're able to score the impression and able to trade in that way. So there are safety measures in place if you go about it the right way.
Okay. Performance, Madi, you want to add anything? Do you see video moving towards post-video performance?
Well, first of all, just before video performance, regarding fraud, there is one thing that, a lot of the platforms here that are combating fraud, and a lot of the companies in general, everybody speaks to platforms. Even now when you mentioned it, you said we are talking to AppNexus and we're in the Google Exchange and all those platforms. Problem is nobody's talking to publishers. Nobody's having this discussion with publishers. Some of the time publishers just because of the lack of understanding, are doing something wrong in their chain where the inventory might come out as fraud. But the publisher never knows it because the feedback is not coming back from the platforms. The platform just flag them as fraud and never give them the knowledge of why that happened. Or
actually, Bachar, it's the same as well. The brands themselves also aren't being involved in the conversation.
Exactly.
Told why it's fraud.
Exactly. And
maybe that was
that was the idea. I think that is a big thing. I think publishers should get into that conversation, and I think companies like Forensiq should come. I had an issue with one of the big publishers we are working with, is that one of the platforms flagged them for fraud. It came out from a different company that flagged them for fraud. Now, I spoke to this publisher, and publishers are suffering today. They're not making any money. And I told him, listen, you've been flagged for fraud inventory. And he told me, listen, I don't even have the money to buy fraud inventory. So even if I want to do fraud, I don't have the budgets to do it. And when we started asking why is it flagged, and they said eventually they told us for injection traffic. Now, injection traffic, it's not the publisher's fault. He shouldn't be flagged for it. It's the users that have it on their computers. But then, again, the publisher here suffered. He lost revenue. Platform stopped working with him with something that's not his problem, and nobody communicated it to him. Nobody told him that that's what's happening. And I think this is one of the issues if we want to really not stop, but minimize a fraud, is have everybody in the discussion.
I mean, you've got to remember that fraud is malicious intent. There is accidental fraud, but publishers are involved in one-by-ones, ad stacking, that's ad manipulation. That is fraudulent. But when it comes to ad injection, when it comes to other aspects, it's not going to be, it doesn't sit at their door. If I'm being honest, it sits very, in my mind, right in the middle on the exchanges and DSPs, Google Ad Exchange being one of them, that it sits at their door as well to clean up their act.
I mean, in our domain, we have a similar problem, but from the other perspective, that we flag some partner as malicious, and they claim it was, only one time, and, and we should whitelist them. So there is always, this dilemma that, that you are flagging someone, but it might have been, an innocent, mistake. At the end of the day, it's a bit more, about technology, but it's not black and white. There is always reputation. I mean, you know the history, you know the partners, you know what they are doing. So if it's a one-time, usually it will be okay and they will be whitelisted. But usually, in our case, when we flag someone, it's because we have good enough evidence along, a few months and even more that there is a malicious activity coming from that demand partner, and then it's been flagged. And not always we will expose why exactly it was a flag. At the end, we don't want to reveal our the secret sauce to the bad guys. So that's another challenge.
Okay, so moving to a little bit looking at the future rather than looking at what's going on right now. Did anyone buy cryptocurrency, and how the hell are you doing it?
I've invested in it,
no,
so I strongly advise you to invest in it.
No, but there is a lot of conversation about cryptocurrency, about blockchain, and about transparency in the industry. I don't understand 70% out of it. How do you think it's going to affect video and ad tech and advertising technology in general? So
it's an interesting one. I mean, really, blockchain is really encrypted audits and the ability to look at transactions and being able to track those transactions. And primarily it's done on financial measurements. So each stage in the chain, you're able to audit it and approve it. From Forensiq side, we're working with a company that's on the Ethereum network, because there's Bitcoin network, Ethereum network, there's huge other different cryptocurrency networks as well, but we work there to authorize and say something is fraudulent or not. One thing people
isn't
need to know,
Ethereum is the coin?
Ethereum is a different cryptocurrency.
So you use the currency to check, to verify the...
You're trading in it completely, really. I mean, so this is the problem with blockchain. It's brilliant.
The trading part.
So yeah, so it's a trading. So it's a trade. You're almost using it to say, from blockchain, it needs to work within the entire industry for it to actually work. That's the downside of blockchain. That until everybody starts using it, how do you get this to work? Because you're paying people within cryptocurrency, which is tricky for people to get their heads around, and for us to, and especially with the volatility of it.
I think it will take more time because currently the blockchain is still limited in the amount of transaction it's capable of performing per second, and the amount of transactions that are happening today in the ads world is so staggering that until the next versions of blockchain and etc. that will allow it to really keep up to pace, I mean, it can be good for maybe vetting certain publisher, etc. But for paying for transaction and everything, it is too slow yet as a technology. It should evolve yet.
I think first of all, blockchain is probably going to be a very good solution to combat fraud. Yesterday or 2 days ago came out an article in DigiDay that IAB is working on ads.cert, which basically use the blockchain technology to pass through the impression. I think once it will come, it's not something that's going to come in the next 2 or 3 years because it will make all the platforms change the whole technology in order to support it. But once that comes out, that really would be a solution to verify your impressions in a really quality and good and automatic way, which can support programmatic. But until that happens, it's far from the AdTech.
I completely agree. I think we welcome the transparency of it, and so does the industry. But the volatility of the cryptocurrency and its value, I think, will take a couple of years to calm down for any of us to be able to say we're going to put our businesses into it. It's all right me trading and buying some bitcoins. That's different to me putting my whole industry or recommending my clients put their industries through it.
Amnon, you have any take on it?
Blockchain, at the end of the day, it's a technology to provide a mechanism to authenticate a transaction in a distributed manner. That's blockchain, in one sentence. I don't know if it necessarily will be blockchain, but at the end of the day, we need to have a mechanism. When you think about programmatic, you have supply, and then the impression go, until you get to a demand partner, and then the creative go the other way around until it's been delivered on the publisher. So the future, eventually, we will have to have a mechanism that allows us in each one of these paths to make sure that only authenticated players are the ones that actually touch the impression or alternatively touch the creative. If we will be able to come up with a technology that will do that, then I think Julia and I will have to retire, and there won't be any more a quality issue. But there are so many challenges to do that. I mean, it's about standards. It's about changing some of the concept about how they are being displayed. So I think it's a very long future, and it won't happen in the near future.
Daniel, what is Google working on in its secret labs around cryptocurrency? Can you share? Yeah, this is yours.
I'm happy to announce.
What's the most secret thing in?
Like I said, I'm from a different department, so I'm not sure.
In the cloud,
Google is also a player in the blockchain. We're also playing with it. I'm not aware. There might be stuff going out, but I'm not aware of it.
Okay, cool. I guess to sum up the discussion, next year we're going to sit here in the same panel. What are we going to talk about? And will Google and Facebook take over the world by then?
What, next year? So sitting here next year, I think there's going to be some shocking headlines, and those that are within video that are caught still trading fraudulently or found to be doing things like false viewabilities, unfortunately, then it might be a case of being named and shamed. There's an appetite from the advertisers to do a bit more naming and shaming. So I hope we're not sat here next year. I think the fear of that will mean this industry will be cleaned up, and we'll be actually heralding innovation and talking about the content and how it's sitting there and how it's performing and outperforming. And fraud will almost be in the background, saying we're just doing our job and doing it well, but let's not need to have a session on this. Although I'd still like to talk next year on a different topic.
I think next year everything will be so advanced with the VR and everything. We won't be sitting here. We'll be sitting in our houses, and there will be a hologram of ours speaking here. And
sounds boring.
People.
I want to come here.
I think that one of the things that we are starting to see, and definitely will be a big topic for 2018, is the convergence of OTT and programmatic. I mean, many of the big broadcaster and OTT players are still sitting on the fence regarding programmatic, but they see the opportunity, and now they are starting, to make the move toward programmatic. So I think that will be a huge opportunity for us, but also, again, the issue of fraud and malware, will become even more important to solve.
Well, next year, probably all of us are still going to be here. Probably most of us are going to do kind of the same things because the industry takes a lot of time to change. But one thing we do see here is that publishers are kind of standing up and starting to shout out loud that they had enough. To see, headlines of Mashable being sold for $50 million after only a year ago it was evaluated for $200 million. It's kind of a shame. And again, at the end of the day, if publishers are going to give up, then AdTech has to give up, and we don't want that to happen. So I think a lot of change is going to happen on the publisher side. Publishers are trying to take control over their inventory and trying to sell it in a more better way, efficient way, and not just rely on the big platforms. But that's what's been happening in the last couple of years. They're just kind of relying on the big guys. So I think that is going to be a big, big change in 2018, but it's going to be a slow one.
So winter is coming or sunshine?
Winter came. Now it's it's springtime now.
Anyone else want to? Okay. Out. So thank you everyone for coming and listening. Next year.